The darkness of space stretched endlessly in all directions as the Zephyrian research vessel, Silent Observer, moved slowly through the outer edge of an unknown solar system. Commander Vextar stood before the main viewing screen, his pale blue skin reflecting the soft glow of the ship's control panels. His large black eyes studied the readings that appeared on the display in front of him. "Commander, we have detected something unusual," called out Science Officer Kethral from his station across the bridge. His long fingers danced over the controls as he refined the sensor readings. "There appears to be a vessel of unknown origin, approximately 2,000 kilometers ahead of us." Vextar turned his elongated head toward his officer. The Zephyrians were a tall and thin species, standing nearly 7 feet in height, but weighing less than most humans. Their bones were light and hollow, evolved for life on a low-gravity world. Their advanced technology had allowed them to explore the galaxy for centuries, but they had always been careful to avoid conflict with other species. "Show me what you have found," Vextar said in his soft voice. The Zephyrians spoke in gentle tones, as their sensitive hearing could be damaged by loud sounds. The main screen flickered, and Ben displayed an image that made several bridge officers lean forward in their seats. A massive ship floated in the void ahead of them, dark and silent. It was unlike anything in their databases. The vessel was roughly cylindrical in shape, with a thick hull that seemed designed more for protection than for speed. Strange markings covered its surface, and what appeared to be weapon ports dotted its sides. "It measures approximately 800 meters in length," Kethral reported, his voice filled with scientific curiosity. "The hull appears to be constructed from refined metals, primarily iron and carbon composites. Very primitive by our standards, but remarkably thick." Dr. Winthala, the ship's chief biologist, moved to stand beside the commander. Her interest was always focused on life forms rather than technology. "Are there any signs of life aboard the vessel?" Kethral adjusted his controls and nodded slowly. "Yes, I am detecting approximately 200 organic life forms. They appear to be in some form of suspended animation or deep sleep. Their life signs are very weak but stable." Vextar studied the image more carefully. The ship looked battered and worn, as if it had seen many battles. Scorch marks on its hull suggested it had been damaged by energy weapons, though not recently. "What is their technology level?" "Quite primitive," Kethral replied after running more detailed scans. "They appear to use nuclear fusion for power, which is several centuries behind our own antimatter systems. Their weapons seem to be kinetic projectiles and basic energy beams, nothing that could threaten our shields." The commander nodded thoughtfully. The Zephyrians had encountered many species during their travels, and most followed predictable patterns. Primitive species were usually either aggressive or fearful when first contacted. It was better to study them first before attempting communication. "Commander," said Navigation Officer Pelinas from his station, "the vessel appears to be drifting. Its engines are cold, and I detect no maneuvering thrusters active. It may be in distress." Dr. Winthala's large eyes brightened with interest. "This presents an excellent opportunity for study. We could learn much about this species before they become aware of our presence." Vextar considered the options carefully. The Zephyrian Collective had strict protocols about first contact with new species. Normally, they would observe from a distance and then attempt peaceful communication. However, if the aliens were truly in distress, studying their technology and biology first might help them provide better assistance. "Very well," the commander decided. "We will approach and conduct a detailed analysis. Prepare a boarding party. For scientific study, Dr. Winthala, I want you to lead the biological research. Kethral, you will handle the technological assessment." The silent observer moved closer to the alien vessel, its advanced cloaking systems ensuring they remained undetected. As they drew near, the details of the strange ship became clearer. The hull was covered in what appeared to be letters and numbers in an alien script. One section near the front bore the markings USS Dakota in large white characters. Fascinating, Dr. Winfala murmured as she studied the biological readings. These creatures are quite large compared to us. They appear to be bipedal, with dense bone structure and significant muscle mass. Their bodies seem designed for a high-gravity environment. Kethral was equally intrigued by the technological readings. Their computer systems are surprisingly sophisticated, despite the primitive power source. However, their security protocols are quite basic. I should be able to access their databases without difficulty. The boarding party prepared quickly and efficiently. Zephyrians were naturally curious and had perfected the art of studying other species without causing alarm. Their portable scanning equipment could analyze everything from genetic structure to technological specifications. They wore environmental suits that would protect them from any harmful organisms or atmosphere aboard the alien vessel. Dr. Winthala selected a team of 3 other biologists to accompany her. Kethral brought 2 computer specialists and an engineer. The boarding shuttle was loaded with equipment designed to make detailed recordings of everything they encountered. Remember, Commander Vextar told his teams before they departed, we are here to study and learn. Take detailed scans of everything, but do not disturb the sleeping aliens unless absolutely necessary. If they begin to wake, retreat immediately, and we will attempt formal contact. The boarding shuttle crossed the short distance between the 2 ships in minutes. The alien vessel had docking ports that were compatible with Zephyrian equipment, suggesting that some designs were universal among spacefaring species. The airlock cycled smoothly, and the boarding party found themselves inside a corridor that seemed enormous by their standards. The ceilings are nearly 3 meters high, noted Dr. Winthala as she began taking readings. These beings must be quite tall and robust. The gravity aboard the alien ship was significantly higher than what the Zephyrians were accustomed to, but their suits compensated automatically. The corridors were lined with what appeared to be emergency lighting that cast a dim red glow throughout the ship. Kethral located a computer terminal and began connecting his analysis equipment. Their systems are surprisingly well protected for such a primitive species, he reported through the communication link. However, I am making progress in accessing their databases. The team split up to cover more ground efficiently. Dr. Winthala headed toward what her scanners indicated were the crew quarters, eager to study the sleeping aliens in their natural environment. Kethral remained focused on the technological systems, while his team members explored the engine rooms and weapon systems. As they moved through the ship, both teams made disturbing discoveries. The vessel was clearly designed for warfare, with redundant systems throughout and armor plating that was incredibly thick for such a primitive civilization. The crew quarters revealed personal belongings that suggested a highly organized military culture. Commander, Dr. Winthala reported quietly, I am finding evidence that this species may be more aggressive than we initially assumed. Their personal items include many weapons and what appear to be combat trophies. The exploration continued for hours as the Zephyrian teams documented everything they found. They were beginning to realize that they had encountered something quite different from the peaceful species they usually studied. These aliens appeared to be warriors, and their entire ship was built around the concept of survival in hostile environments. None of them noticed the subtle changes beginning to occur in the ship's systems, as backup power slowly restored critical functions throughout the vessel. 3 days had passed since the Zephyrian boarding party first entered the alien vessel. Dr. Winthala had established a temporary research station in one of the ship's larger corridors, surrounded by scanning equipment and data collection devices. Her team had made remarkable progress in studying the sleeping creatures. Though many of their findings were deeply troubling, the aliens were even more physically imposing than initial scans had suggested. The largest of them stood over 2 meters tall, with muscle density that was almost impossible for Zephyrian minds to comprehend. Their bone structure was incredibly dense, and their cardiovascular systems suggested they came from a world with crushing gravity and possibly a hostile atmosphere. These beings are built for survival in conditions that would kill most known species. Dr. Wing-Thala reported to Commander Vex-Star during one of her regular updates. Their bodies show evidence of adaptation to extreme stress, violence, and environmental hazards. Kethrol had been equally busy with his technological analysis. The alien computer systems had proven more challenging than expected, but his team had finally broken through their security protocols. What they found in the databases was disturbing beyond their worst expectations. "Commander, you need to see this," Kethrol transmitted urgently from the ship's bridge. "I have accessed their historical records and military files. This species has been engaged in constant warfare for their entire recorded history." The data files revealed a civilization that had turned conflict into an art form. The aliens called themselves humans, and their home world was a planet they named Earth. Every aspect of their society seemed designed around the concept of organized violence. Their military structures were incredibly sophisticated, and their weapons technology focused entirely on maximum destruction rather than efficiency docked deep within the ship's medical bay. Something began to change. The backup power systems that had been slowly regenerating finally reached a critical threshold. Automated revival procedures started throughout the vessel as emergency protocols recognized that minimum power levels had been restored. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes was among the first to feel the effects of the revival process. The chemicals flowing through her stasis pod began to change as stimulants replaced the sleep-inducing compounds. Her brain started processing information. Again, after 3 weeks of unconsciousness, Lisa's eyes opened slowly as the stasis fluid drained from her pod. Her enhanced metabolism quickly cleared the remaining drugs from her system, and her military training kicked in immediately. She lay still for several minutes, listening to the sounds around her and assessing her situation through pure instinct. Something was wrong aboard the Dakota. The lighting was different, and she could hear sounds that did not belong on her ship. Voices speaking in a language she had never heard before echoed from the corridors outside the medical bay. Moving carefully and silently, Lisa extracted herself from the stasis pod and found her emergency gear locker. Her sidearm was still secured in its holster, and her combat knife remained strapped to her leg. The fact that she still had her weapons suggested that whoever had boarded their ship was either careless or had not recognized them as threats. Lisa accessed a wall-mounted terminal and quickly reviewed the ship's status. What she found made her blood run cold. Unknown life forms were detected throughout the vessel, and the security recordings showed alien beings moving freely through restricted areas. The intruders had been aboard for 3 days, studying her crew like laboratory specimens. Her first priority was to wake Captain Jake Morrison. Lisa moved through the corridors like a ghost, using maintenance passages and emergency routes to avoid detection. Her military training had prepared her for exactly this type of situation, and she knew that stealth was her greatest advantage until more of the crew could be revived. Dr. Wing-Thala was focused on her scanning equipment when her readings suddenly changed. The biological signatures of the sleeping aliens were shifting rapidly as their metabolisms accelerated. Chemical compounds that had kept them unconscious were being replaced by different substances that appeared to be combat stimulants. "Kethrol," she called through her communicator. "The aliens are beginning to wake up. Their bodies are producing massive amounts of adrenaline and other stress hormones." Before Kethrol could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the alien vessel. Emergency lighting activated in sections that had been dark for weeks, and the subtle vibrations of awakening machinery could be felt through the deck plates. Captain Jake Morrison's eyes snapped open as the revival drugs hit his system. Unlike Dr. Winthala expected, he showed no confusion or disorientation. His first action was to check his chronometer and assess how long he had been unconscious. His second was to reach for the emergency communicator built into his stasis pod. Lisa's voice crackled through the device immediately. "Captain, we have been boarded by unknown hostiles. They have been studying us for 3 days while we were in stasis." Jake's response was calm and measured, showing none of the panic that the Zephyrians had observed in other species during crisis situations. "Understood, Lisa. How many are awake?" "I count at least 6 aliens moving through the ship. They appear to be some kind of research team. I'm heading to wake the senior staff now." "Negative," Jake replied quietly. "Wake the security team first. We treat this as a hostile intelligence gathering operation until proven otherwise." Throughout the ship, more stasis pods began their revival cycles. Chief Security Officer Ryan Bell emerged from his pod with the fluid grace of a predator, immediately checking his weapons and communication gear. Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's chief medical officer, began administering stimulants to accelerate the revival process for key personnel. The Zephyrian boarding party suddenly found themselves in an increasingly dangerous situation. The beings they had been studying were not only awake, but were moving through their own ship with a level of coordination and purpose that was deeply unsettling. Commander Vextar watched the situation develop from his command chair aboard the Silent Observer. "All teams, prepare for immediate extraction. The aliens are awake and appear to be organizing some form of response." Dr. Winthala packed her equipment quickly, but she was reluctant to leave before completing her studies. "Commander, the data I am collecting is invaluable. These beings are unlike anything we have encountered before." "Doctor, extract immediately," Vextar ordered firmly. "We can analyze the data you have already collected from the safety of our own ship." Cathral was having similar difficulties. His analysis of the human computer systems had revealed disturbing information about their military capabilities, but he needed more time to fully understand their technology. "Commander, I am finding evidence that these beings possess weapons that could threaten our vessel despite their primitive power systems." The situation aboard the Dakota continued to evolve rapidly. More crew members were awakening every few minutes, and each one immediately fell into their assigned role without hesitation or confusion. The humans moved with the precision of a military unit that had trained together for years. Jake Morrison made his way to the bridge, using hand signals to communicate with his awakening crew members. The aliens had made a critical error by allowing the humans to wake up while still aboard their ship. Now the Dakota's crew held the advantage of fighting on familiar ground. "Lisa, status report," Jake whispered as he reached the command center. 17 crew members awake and armed. The aliens appear to be scientific researchers rather than soldiers, but their technology is clearly superior to ours. They have some kind of advanced scanning equipment, and their environmental suits suggest they come from a low-gravity world. Jake nodded as he accessed the ship's internal sensors. The alien intruders were easy to track now that he knew what to look for. They moved awkwardly in the Dakota's gravity, and their lightweight construction made them vulnerable to physical confrontation. "Ryan, take your team and secure the main corridors. Do not engage unless they threaten the crew, but make sure they know we are awake and aware of their presence." The chess game between the two species had begun, and the Zephyrians were starting to realize they had made a serious miscalculation about the nature of their test subjects. The tension aboard the USS Dakota reached a breaking point as both species became fully aware of each other's presence. Commander Vextar decided that direct communication was their best option for avoiding a dangerous confrontation. He activated the universal translator that all Zephyrian ships carried and prepared to send a message to the human vessel. Unknown species. Vextar's voice echoed through the Dakota's communication systems in carefully translated words. We are peaceful researchers from the Zephyrian Collective. We discovered your ship in distress and boarded only to provide assistance. We mean you no harm. Captain Jake Morrison listened to the message from his position on the bridge, surrounded by his senior officers. His expression remained calm and controlled, but his eyes held a cold intensity that would have worried the aliens if they could have seen it. Lisa Hayes stood beside him, her hand resting casually on her sidearm. Peaceful researchers, Jake repeated quietly to his crew, who spent 3 days going through our personal belongings and downloading our computer files without permission. Dr. Amy Foster had been reviewing the medical bay's security recordings during the aliens' unauthorized visit. What she found made her jaw clench with barely controlled anger. Captain, they took tissue samples from several crew members while we were unconscious. They've been studying us like laboratory animals. Ryan Bell's security team had been busy as well. Their investigation revealed that the aliens had accessed virtually every system on the ship, including classified military databases and personal crew records. The violation of privacy and security was total and deliberate. Sir, Ryan reported through his communicator, they've been in everything. Weapons systems, navigation logs, personnel files, even private messages between crew members and their families back on Earth. Jake's response to the alien message was carefully worded, but carried an undertone that the universal translator struggled to convey accurately. Zephyrian vessel, you have been aboard our ship for 3 days without permission, accessing restricted military information and conducting unauthorized medical procedures on my crew. Explain your actions immediately. Aboard the Silent Observer, Commander Vextar felt a chill at the human's tone despite the mechanical nature of the translation. Dr. Winthala was still studying her readings from the boarding party and making increasingly disturbing discoveries about human psychology. Commander, she reported urgently, the humans are not responding to our presence the way other species typically do. Most beings show fear or submission when confronted by superior technology. These creatures appear to be getting more aggressive the longer this situation continues. Kethrol was having similar concerns about the technological aspects of the encounter. His analysis of human military systems revealed designs that prioritize destructive capability over efficiency or elegance. Their weapons are primitive but incredibly effective. Everything is built with multiple backup systems, as if they expect to continue fighting even after suffering massive damage. The situation grew more tense when engineer Pete Collins made a discovery that changed everything. While inspecting the ship's systems to assess what information the aliens had accessed, he found evidence of data theft on a scale that shocked even the experienced crew. Captain, Pete called from the engineering section. They didn't just look at our files. They copied everything. Technical specifications, tactical databases, crew psychological profiles, even our personal communications with Earth Command. This wasn't scientific curiosity. This was espionage. The mood among the human crew shifted dramatically from cautious diplomacy to barely controlled hostility. These aliens had violated every protocol of civilized first contact and had treated them like specimens in a laboratory. The military training of every crew member aboard the Dakota was screaming that this was an intelligence-gathering operation by a potential enemy. Jake Morrison's second communication to the Zephyrian ship reflected this change in attitude. Zephyrian Commander, you have committed acts that we consider hostile intelligence gathering. You will immediately transfer all copied data back to our systems and withdraw your boarding party. Any attempt to leave with stolen information will be considered an act of war. The word war sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian crew. Their species had not engaged in military conflict for over 1,000 years, and the concept was almost alien to their peaceful nature. Commander Vextar realized that the situation was spiraling beyond his control. Dr. Winthala continued her psychological analysis of the humans, and her findings were becoming more disturbing with each passing minute. Commander, these beings show no fear response to our superior technology. Their stress hormones are elevated, but in patterns consistent with preparation for combat rather than submission or flight. What the Zephyrians did not understand was that humans had evolved under very different circumstances than most galactic species. Earth was a world where survival required constant vigilance, and humanity had spent millions of years learning to respond to threats with coordinated violence rather than individual submission. Lisa Hayes demonstrated this human approach to problem-solving when she presented Captain Morrison with a tactical assessment that made the aliens listening devices record conversations they wished they had never heard. Sir, if we need to prevent them from leaving with our data, I recommend we use the damaged fusion reactor as an improvised weapon. We can overload the containment system and create a localized explosion that will destroy both ships. The crew can evacuate to the emergency pods, but the aliens won't have time to escape with their larger vessel. The casual way that Lisa discussed, potentially sacrificing their own lives to destroy an enemy, was recorded by Zephyrian monitoring equipment and transmitted back to their ship. Commander Vextar listened to the translated conversation with growing horror. They are discussing mutual destruction as if it were a routine tactical option, he whispered to his bridge crew. What kind of species considers dying in battle to be an acceptable outcome? Kethral had been monitoring other human communications and was making equally disturbing discoveries. Commander, they are discussing casualty ratios and acceptable losses in ways that suggest they have extensive experience with warfare. Their military protocols include scenarios for fighting, even when vastly outnumbered or outgunned. Dr. Amy Foster provided another piece of the puzzle that terrified the Zephyrian observers. During a conversation with Captain Morrison about the crew's physical condition, she mentioned that several crew members were actually performing better after the stims she had administered to accelerate their recovery from stasis. The combat stimulants are having their intended effect, Amy reported clinically. Heart rates are elevated, reaction times are improved, and pain sensitivity is reduced. The crew is now operating at peak combat effectiveness. The Zephyrian scanning equipment detected the chemical changes in human physiology and were appalled to discover that the aliens were voluntarily injecting themselves with substances that would be lethal to most species. The humans were literally poisoning themselves to become more effective warriors. Commander Vextar began to understand that they had encountered something far more dangerous than a primitive species with basic technology. These creatures had evolved on a world that had taught them to respond to every challenge with organized violence, and they had developed military systems that reflected this fundamental aspect of their nature. All boarding teams, prepare for immediate withdrawal, Vextar ordered. We are dealing with a species that may be more dangerous than anything in our databases. But Dr. Winthala was reluctant to leave without completing her studies. The psychological profiles she was developing of humanity were unlike anything she had encountered before, and she knew that the data would be invaluable to the collective's xenobiological databases. Commander, just a few more hours of observation could provide insights that might prevent future conflicts with this species, she argued. Vextar's response was sharp and final. Doctor, we are not observing laboratory specimens. We are dealing with apex predators who have just realized that we have been studying them without permission. Withdraw immediately before this situation becomes violent. The Zephyrian boarding party began their withdrawal, but the damage to interspecies relations had already been done. The humans now knew that there were other intelligent species in the galaxy, and their first contact had been with aliens who treated them like test subjects rather than equals. Captain Morrison watched the alien retreat through his ship's internal sensors and made a decision that would have long-term consequences for both species. He activated the Dakota's long-range communication array and began composing a message to Earth Fleet Command that would change humanity's approach to galactic exploration forever. Back aboard the Silent Observer, the Zephyrian research teams worked frantically to compile their findings about humanity before the situation deteriorated further. The data they had collected painted a picture of a species so fundamentally different from anything in their databases that many of the scientists refused to believe their own results. Dr. Wynne Thala sat in her laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing human biological data. Her hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the psychological profiles her team had developed during their 3-day study. The results were unlike anything she had encountered in decades of xenobiological research. The human nervous system is designed for constant stress and threat assessment, she reported to Commander Vextar during an emergency briefing. Their brains produce chemicals that would cause permanent psychological damage in most species, but humans seem to thrive under these conditions. The biological analysis revealed that humans were indeed apex predators who had evolved on what could only be described as a death world. Their muscle density was 3 times greater than any known spacefaring species. Their bone structure could withstand impacts that would shatter Zephyrian skeletons, and their cardiovascular system was built to function under extreme physical stress. Most disturbing, Dr. Wynne Thala continued, is their pack behavior. Humans demonstrate loyalty to their group that overrides individual survival instincts. They will literally die to protect other members of their unit, and they show no fear when facing superior odds. Chief Engineer Kelter had been analyzing the technological aspects of human civilization, and his findings were equally troubling. The USS Dakota represented military engineering philosophy that was completely alien to Zephyrian thinking. Their technology prioritizes reliability and destructive power over efficiency. Kelter explained to the assembled command staff. Every system has multiple backups, and their weapons are designed to continue functioning even after sustaining massive damage. The human approach to warfare was revealed through their military databases, which Kethral had successfully downloaded before the crew awakened. The files contained detailed records of thousands of years of continuous conflict, from primitive tribal warfare to sophisticated planetary battles. They have been fighting each other for their entire recorded history, Kethral reported with barely concealed horror. Their military doctrine includes tactics for fighting in every conceivable environment, from underwater to zero gravity to toxic atmospheres. What shocked the Zephyrian analysts most was the casual way humans discussed violence and death. Their military manuals contained detailed instructions for hand-to-hand combat, psychological warfare, and something they called scorched earth, tactics that involved destroying everything of value to deny it to enemies. They have weaponized their own extinction instinct, Dr. Wynne Thala observed during her psychological analysis. When faced with impossible odds, humans become more dangerous rather than more cooperative. They would rather die fighting than surrender. Commander. Vextar listened to these reports with growing alarm. The Zephyrian collective had encountered hundreds of species during their exploration of the galaxy, but none had ever displayed such a fundamental commitment to organized violence. What are our tactical options if this situation becomes hostile? He asked his military advisor, a role that had been largely ceremonial for the past several centuries. Defense Coordinator. Chevrick consulted his rarely used combat protocols. Commander, our shields and weapons are designed for defense against space hazards and the occasional pirate vessel. We have never encountered a species that builds their entire civilization around military conflict. The analysis of human historical records revealed the true scope of their martial culture. Humans had fought 2 global wars that involved hundreds of millions of casualties, developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, and had never experienced a period longer than a few years without some form of organized conflict somewhere on their world. They call it the Pax Americana, Kethral explained, a period when one human nation became so powerful that it could prevent large-scale wars. But even during this peaceful time, they maintained military forces larger than the entire population. Of most worlds we have encountered, the Zephyrian scientists were particularly disturbed by human medical technology, which seemed designed around the assumption that personnel would be regularly injured in combat. Dr. Amy Foster's casual administration of combat stimulants was just one example of how humans had adapted their biology for warfare. They have developed drugs that allow them to continue fighting even with injuries that would incapacitate other species, Dr. Winthala reported. Their medical procedures include techniques for treating battlefield wounds that would be fatal to most known life forms. Meanwhile, aboard the USS Dakota, Captain Jake Morrison was conducting his own analysis of the situation. His crew had been systematically reviewing everything the aliens had accessed during their unauthorized boarding, and the scope of the intelligence breach was staggering. "They know everything about us," Lisa Hayes reported during the senior staff meeting. "Ship specifications, crew psychological profiles, Earth's location, our military capabilities, even our personal relationships and family connections." Ryan Bell had been studying the aliens themselves through the ship's internal sensors, and his assessment was tactically focused. They're physically fragile, probably from a low-gravity world. Their environmental suits suggest they can't survive in our atmosphere. They move awkwardly in our ship's gravity, which gives us a significant advantage in close combat. Dr. Amy Foster provided the medical perspective that would prove most crucial to the developing situation. "Captain, I've been analyzing the air samples from areas where the aliens have been working. They've been exposed to human pathogens for 3 days without proper biological protection. The implications of this observation were not immediately clear to most of the crew, but Amy's explanation made everyone understand the gravity of the situation. These aliens appear to come from a sterile environment. Their immune systems probably have no defense against Earth-based microorganisms." Engineer Pete Collins had been working on restoring the Dakota's full operational capabilities, and his progress report brought both good and bad news. "Sir, I can have weapons and navigation systems back online within 6 hours. The bad news is that our faster-than-light communication array was damaged when we lost main power." This meant that Jake's message to Earth Fleet Command would take time to reach its destination, but he had already included everything the crew had learned about their alien visitors. The message contained detailed scans of Zephyrian technology, biological data, and tactical assessments that would revolutionize humanity's approach to galactic exploration. If these aliens represent the typical level of galactic civilization, Jake observed to his officers, and humanity may have significant advantages that we never expected. The psychological profiles worked both ways. While the Zephyrians had been studying human behavior, the humans had been observing their captors. The aliens showed no signs of aggressive behavior, seemed uncomfortable with confrontation, and appeared to make decisions through lengthy consultations rather than decisive command structures. "They're scientists, not soldiers," Ryan concluded. "They're probably more frightened of us than we are of them, especially now that they understand what they're dealing with." Dr. Amy Foster raised the most important question that would determine the outcome of the encounter. "Captain, what do we do if they try to leave with all the information they've stolen about Earth and humanity?" Jake Morrison's answer reflected the military training that had shaped his entire adult life. "We prevent them from leaving, whatever the cost. Earth's security cannot be compromised by our first contact with alien intelligence." The stage was set for a confrontation between two species with completely different approaches to survival and conflict resolution. The Zephyrians wanted to withdraw and study their data safely, while the humans were prepared to destroy both ships rather than allow classified information about their homeworld to fall into unknown hands. Both sides were beginning to understand that this first contact scenario had the potential to determine the future relationship between humanity and the rest of galactic civilization. Commander Vexstar made the decision that he hoped would save both species from a catastrophic first contact incident. Standing on the bridge of the Silent Observer, he activated the communication array and prepared to offer complete surrender. To the humans, Captain Morrison, his translated voice carried across the void between the two ships, we formally apologize for our unauthorized study of your vessel and crew. We will return all collected data and withdraw immediately from your space. But Vexstar's offer came too late. Jake Morrison had already activated the Dakota's emergency beacon 3 hours earlier, and the message was now racing toward Earth at faster-than-light speeds. Even worse from the Zephyrian perspective, Jake had used those 3 hours to restore critical ship systems and prepare his crew for whatever might come next. Zephyrian Commander. Jake's response was calm, but carried an undertone that made the alien translation system struggle to convey the proper meaning. You have been in possession of classified Earth military data for over 6 hours. Our protocols require that we treat this as a potential act of espionage until proven otherwise. Dr. Wynne Falla was frantically packing her research equipment when her biological scanners detected something that made her freeze in terror. The readings from her team's environmental suits showed clear evidence of contamination by unknown microorganisms. Commander, she called urgently through her communicator, we have been exposed to alien pathogens for 3 days. Our medical systems are detecting biological agents that our immune systems cannot identify. The implications of this discovery hit the Zephyrian crew like a physical blow. Their species had evolved in carefully controlled environments for thousands of years, and their immune systems had never been challenged by the chaotic biological diversity of a world like Earth. Cathrall was having his own crisis as he attempted to comply with the human demand to return their stolen data. Commander, their computer systems are more sophisticated than we initially believed. They have tracking protocols embedded in every file we accessed. Even if we delete our copies, they will know exactly what information we obtained. The situation aboard the Dakota was evolving in ways that the Zephyrians could never have anticipated. Dr. Amy Foster had been monitoring the alien boarding party through the ship's internal sensors, and her medical analysis was providing Captain Morrison with leverage he had not expected to possess. Sir, Amy reported during a private consultation with the senior staff, the aliens have been breathing our ship's atmosphere for 3 days without proper biological protection. They've been exposed to thousands of Earth-based microorganisms, but their sterile environment hasn't prepared them to handle. Jake Morrison understood the implications immediately. How long before they start showing symptoms? Based on their physiology and what I can determine about their immune systems, probably within the next few hours, Amy replied clinically. They'll need immediate medical treatment, or the exposure could be fatal. This medical crisis provided Jake with an unexpected opportunity to demonstrate human values while also securing his ship's safety. He activated the communication system and made an offer that surprised everyone aboard both vessels. Zephyrian Commander, our medical officer, has determined that your boarding party has been exposed to biological agents that could be harmful to your species. We offer immediate medical assistance and safe passage for your personnel in exchange for complete disclosure of all data collected during your unauthorized study. Commander Vexstar felt a mixture of relief and confusion at the human offer. His species encounters with other civilizations had taught him that most advanced species would exploit such a weakness rather than offer assistance. Captain Morrison Why would you offer medical aid to beings who have violated your ship and stolen your military secrets? Jake's response revealed something about human nature that the Zephyrians had not detected in all their careful analysis. Because that's what civilized beings do, Commander. We help those in need, even former enemies. The concept of showing mercy to an opponent was so foreign to Zephyrian understanding that their translation systems had difficulty conveying the proper meaning. Their species had avoided conflict for so long that they had forgotten how warriors could also demonstrate honor and compassion. Dr. Winthal's condition was deteriorating rapidly as her immune system struggled to cope with exposure to Earth bacteria. Her team was experiencing similar symptoms, and it became clear that they would need human medical intervention to survive. Commander, she transmitted weakly from the Dakota's corridor where she had collapsed. I recommend we accept their offer. The humans appear to understand our biological needs better than we understood theirs. The boarding party was carefully transported to the Dakota's medical bay, where Dr. Amy Foster began treating them with a combination of human antibiotics and improvised therapies designed for their alien physiology. The irony was not lost on anyone that the species they had been studying was now saving their lives. As Amy worked to stabilize the Zephyrian researchers, she made casual conversation that revealed more about human nature than 3 days of covert observation had accomplished. Your people are fortunate that you encountered us rather than some of the other species we've heard about in our galaxy surveys, Amy mentioned while administering medication. There are rumors of civilizations that would have considered your unauthorized boarding an act of war. Dr. Winthala, despite her weakened condition, recognized the significance of Amy's statement. You have encountered other spacefaring species? Not directly, Amy replied, but our deep space monitoring stations have detected signs of at least 12 different civilizations within 100 light years of Earth. We've been preparing for first contact for decades. This revelation shocked the Zephyrian research team more than anything else they had discovered about humanity. The humans were not primitive isolationists stumbling into galactic civilization. They were prepared, organized, and had been studying their potential neighbors. For years, Kethril, recovering in the medical bay beside his colleague, made the observation that would haunt Zephyrian strategic planning for years to come. They knew we were out here, and they were ready for us. The situation reached its climax when 3 Earth fleet destroyers dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Captain Morrison's distress beacon had reached Earth, and the response was swift and overwhelming. The human reinforcements were nothing like the Dakota. These were ships built purely for warfare, bristling with weapons and armor that made even the primitive human technology seem formidable. Their arrival sent a clear message about human priorities and capabilities. Commander, Vextar watched the approaching Earth fleet vessels with growing dread. Each ship was larger than his research vessel and radiated the kind of aggressive energy that suggested their crews were eager for a fight. Captain Morrison, Vextar transmitted desperately, we formally surrender all data and request safe passage to leave your territory. We have no desire for conflict with your species. Jake's response demonstrated the kind of strategic thinking that had made humanity successful despite their primitive technology. Commander, you and your crew are welcome to leave peacefully after we complete our own analysis of your vessel and technology. Consider it a cultural exchange. The tables had completely turned. The species that had spent 3 days studying humans as primitive specimens now found themselves being examined by beings who had proven far more dangerous and sophisticated than anyone had imagined. Dr. Winthala, now recovering under human medical care, made detailed notes about her experience for the Zephyrian databases. Her final report would recommend that the collective establish a wide exclusion zone around human space and never again attempt to study them without formal diplomatic contact. These beings have turned warfare into both science and art, she wrote in her conclusions. They represent a level of organized violence that our civilization is not equipped to handle. Any future contact should be conducted with extreme caution and full military preparation. Captain Jake Morrison updated Earth's xenobiology databases. With detailed scans of Zephyrian physiology and technology, information that would prove valuable if the two species ever met again under less peaceful circumstances. The Dakota's encounter had provided humanity with its first detailed intelligence about galactic civilization, and the implications would influence Earth's expansion into space for generations to come. The Zephyrian research vessel departed human space with a new understanding of their place in the galactic hierarchy, while humanity began preparing for a future where they were no longer alone in the universe.